This is Good Books, Big Questions, bold, loving, and sensible conversations about faith. I'm Karen Stiller. My guest is Dominique Young. She's the author of God, Where Are You? Unmasking Your Pain, Uncovering His Presence. Here is our conversation, unabridged. Welcome, Dominique.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited because you're going to help me and hopefully all our listeners uncover God's presence, because the question you're dealing with feels like it's common and so important. Your book takes readers through a process of looking for and finding God in our pain. What was the big question you're exploring in the book?
I think the big question is the title. God, where are you? And that big question kind of started from me when I was navigating some really hard times in my life and I was struggling to find God. And I began to ask that question. It started out as a question that I really wasn't looking for the answer to. And then eventually I got desperate enough to start seeking the answer, and my whole life changed from there.
Wow. Why do you think, before we get into the how maybe, why do you think it's so hard for us to see that God is with us in hard times? Because I will say, I think it's not the best system in the world. Like, it's such a common experience. I've heard this so often from people recovering from really big loss or grief, or living with grief and disappointment. And it's sometimes this thing that they just don't feel God is there.
Yeah, I think pain is blinding. And so even if I take it outside of our relationship with God and I just compare it to my relationship with my husband, there was a time where I was in so much pain and my husband was so very loving and so very caring and so very present. But I was like, I'm all alone. I couldn't feel his love. I couldn't experience it. The pain was really blinding for me. I felt alone in what I was going through. I had a best friend. I had a husband. I had a child that loved me, but yet I couldn't see it because pain can be blinding to the love that's very present, even in our human to human interactions. And so we see that same thing in our relationship with God.
Well, and what strikes me hearing that answer, Dominique, and that line, pain can be blinding, I totally resonate with that. But that we do have some agency in this process is, I think, what I'm hearing you saying. And in the book, you write, it is our hiddenness and not our brokenness that makes us feel distant from God. What do you mean by that?
So if you're anything like me, and I've talked to a lot of people who are, when life hurts, we want to hide away. We want to kind of put on a mask and try to navigate life as if it wasn't painful and look a certain way. And our hiddenness is what keeps us oftentimes away from people. There were a couple of friends of mine that actually read my book, and they were very involved in my life during the time when I was navigating large amounts of depression and anxiety, and so many things were going on, and they had no idea. And though they know now and they're reading the book, they're like, oh, it just hurts me so much that I had no idea. And so it was really my hiddenness that was keeping me from the love that was very available. But I was ashamed that I was in pain. And so therefore I hid away, and I didn't realize that there was love right there waiting for me.
And you were ashamed of your pain because you felt that that wasn't the right way to be?
Yeah. And because it seems as though, although we know pain is a part of the human experience, it's not a part anybody wants. And it's also oftentimes connected to a mistake, a failure, something we didn't do. Especially in the Christian faith, I think there is this idea. I grew up kind of in this prosperity gospel centered place where it was like, if you believe hard enough, your life will be great if you have the right prayers, if you believe the right stuff, if you pray at the right times in the right way, you will get every desire, all your desires. And so when you're walking through life and you're praying the way that everybody told you to pray, and you're doing all the things and life still sucks,
Yeah.
and you're wondering, what did I do wrong? what am I doing wrong? Am I wrong? Is it me? Am I broken? I must be the problem. And when that starts to take root and that shame starts to happen around the pain, then it's very easy to just put on masks and hide.
Yeah, you write in the book, and I found this so helpful, that code switching is a form of hiding. And I think that's where, when we put on our masks, can you explain for people who maybe don't know what code switching is and how Christians sometimes do it with other Christians?
Yeah. So code switching is basically taking on a character and portraying that character to the world. And in the book, I talk a lot about, so I'm an African-American woman. And in my culture, they talk a lot about, we know code switching, like we know what it is, because ultimately that was how we're taught. I was taught by my grandmother that when you go on an interview, there's a way that you talk. And if you've heard me when I was a kid versus hearing me now, I sound a lot different. My cadence is different. The way that I talk is different. And a lot of that came from my grandmother training me how to sound more white, or what she perceived as more white, because she's like, I want you to get a good job. Her desire was noble. She wanted me to have a good life. She wanted me to get a good job. And in order to do that, I had to take on a different character, because who I was, though she wasn't saying this plainly, but who I wasn't good enough to get the job. And so she taught me how to be someone else. She taught me how to straighten my hair a certain way. Even today, sometimes I get nervous when my hair is in its natural state because it's curly and it's puffy and, things like that. And I was taught when I was younger that you have to look a certain way. So you take on this character, and that's known as code switching. So when I'm home, I can wear braids, I can wear the afro, I can talk the way that my neighbors talk. But when I am in public, or when I go for a job, I straighten my hair. I sound a little different. My cadence changes. And I got so good at code switching. My husband makes fun of me sometimes, but I got so good at code switching that I got lost in the character a little bit. And so my voice tends to just stay the same. Because I practiced it. Like my grandmother and I, we practiced it. We practiced walking because she was very adamant that she wanted me to have this good life, and this character that she was helping me to develop would allow me to have that in her thought process. And so code switching also happens in the church. When we go into the church and we think, oh, I'm around church folks now. I need to put on my best foot forward. Sometimes it's like, I got to put on pantyhose. I never wear pantyhose anywhere else. But if I'm going into the church, I've got pantyhose on. I got to make sure that my dress is a certain length. I've got to make sure that I say certain things. I've got to know the vernacular. I've got to understand how to maneuver in this setting. And so I become the character that I think will be successful in the space that I'm in.
Wow. I 100% agree that happens in the church. And I was a minister's wife for many, many years, and I felt the pressure to be sort of a certain way until I realized I can't do it. I can't possibly do it. And that's sort of what forced me out of that character, I think. And what I have found, Dominique, and I wonder if this is true, if this resonates with you, is that because people had me on a bit of a holy pedestal that I had should not have been on, when I confessed or revealed my true self or my own doubts, my bad times, trouble with our kids, whatever it was, when I risked transparency and authenticity, it felt like it opened the door for other people. It was like an invitation for them to also be honest back. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. That was my experience as well. And it was quite shocking. I was shocked that people really resonated with the fact that, wait a minute, you've gone through this too? Oh, wow. And I was getting a lot of that. And I started to wonder, why is that? And I realized that we, code switching and costume wearing, we usually mirror one another. And so we go into a space and we learn how to look the part from all the other people looking the part. And then when someone comes in and looks different, they draw attention, and it's like, wait, everybody here is not wearing the same costume. I can take this off. I mean, it's itchy anyway. Like I didn't want to wear it anyway. And I think we look around at people for permission to take off the itchy, annoying, invisible costume. But the truth of the matter is, in most spaces, one person has to go first. There's someone that goes first and gives other people permission to take their costumes off as well.
Ball up those pantyhose.
Exactly.
So I have thought of it as the surprise relief cycle of authenticity. So first of all, someone's like, what? You think that or whatever? And then the relief of, actually, me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And authenticity can be a bit jarring because so often, and this was what was shocking to me, I thought I was the only one in costume until I took mine off and realized, whoa, we're all in some kind of costume here. And authenticity gives permission. One person starts it and it gives permission to other people to start being authentic and taking off the costume. And it happens gradually and over time. And oftentimes some people look at you like you're crazy, like, what in the world? But then eventually you start hearing a little bit of their story and it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
So it takes courage to be the first one. And probably we don't need to do it in a room full of people necessarily the first time. So if we're looking for one good friend, like how do we find the person with whom we feel we can be transparent, and how do we get over our fear?
That's a great question. So my journey was more of a Band-Aid being ripped off. And I know that some people have that journey where you really weren't trying to be authentic. Like that was not the plan. Yes. That was not the goal. And something happened where either the mask fell off, got ripped off, or something like that. And then you learn to walk in it. So that's one place. And that's kind of the place where I've come from. But also what I've noticed as I've interacted with other people is that there's also the progressive authenticity, right? So it starts with a conversation either with God himself in a private room, all alone by yourself with God, and you're just really laying it out there and pouring it out. And then slowly bringing one person into that space with you. Yeah. And that one person for some people has been a professional, like it went from God to a therapist, or it was God and then my best friend. And then one person at a time, you let into this space of, this is where I truly am. These are the things that I'm really grappling with. And for me, when the mask kind of got ripped off, is what I would say, so a few people automatically came in just because of the nature of what happened in my life. And it was a little faster than I would have wanted it. But I noticed that most of my most early authentic moments happened with God, like shouting, crying, screaming for the first time. Because before I would kind of pray these, like, I called them polite prayers. Even though my insides were screaming, I would pray these really polite prayers. But then when the mask got ripped off, I was like, God, please, just, I don't know. And then all the emotions and everything started coming out authentically with God first, and real and raw. And I noticed how God would bring, it started with my husband. We started having really challenging conversations. The therapists that were there, we started having really challenging conversations. And little by little, relationship by relationship, I began to find healing in vulnerability.
I think some people, I assume this is true, still have that message in their mind that we can't be 100% honest with God, maybe, or that we can't yell and scream and rant and weep, and which I've absolutely done too. This may be an odd question, but if you could, what's your one piece of advice, assuming you can't help it? Like we're talking, sorry, Margot's going to have to edit this, Margot. I'm going to ask that question again. Dominique, if there's someone out there who still feels hindered somewhat in how they pray or how they communicate with God, what encouragement would you give them to just, you can say anything, you can be free, you can cry and tell your deepest truth to God?
The encouragement that I would give them is just start one step at a time. I find that being open and vulnerable in that way is not something that everybody learns how to do. And it is a process. And also, our own emotions can be scary.
Yeah.
And, to actually allow the sadness to really come out in the crackle of your voice and in the tears that stream, can be terrifying. And so I would encourage people to one step at a time, give God one more piece of vulnerability, a little bit more, and then allow yourself to truly just lean completely in on that relationship with God. A lot of times we hold back and we pull back our emotions because we don't want to hurt the person that we love. And I think that's noble and it's beautiful. We don't want to hurt the person. We don't want to be disrespectful. We don't want to cause harm. And even in our relationship with God, we don't want the relationship to break. We don't want him to feel like we don't love him. And I'm here to tell you from my experience, he knows.
Yeah.
He knows that you love him. He knows that you're struggling. He knows that you're wrestling with the hard questions. He knows everything that you could ever possibly think. So nothing that comes out is going to surprise him.
Mm-hmm.
Nor is it going to cause him to pull away. And I know that me saying that may not be the relief that someone needs, but I just encourage you to start with one step. Maybe cry, allow yourself to cry, allow your voice to crackle a little bit. And you will be pleasantly surprised that God doesn't run for the hills when our emotions enter the chat.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I think I clearly remember the first time when I really allowed myself to, pray really honestly, in that I was lamenting. I was deep into lament after the loss of my husband, and I was on a country road alone. I hope I was alone, Dominique, actually. I'm not sure. I didn't see anyone else, but I talked out loud and I cried and I lifted my head to heaven and I yelled and, I probably screamed. I just let it all out. And yeah, I wasn't struck by lightning. I felt better after. Mm-hmm. I felt reassured. I just knew deeply, wow, I really needed to do that. That was a good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so beautiful that the presence of God is often what we're afraid to lose. And sometimes it's hard for us to find his presence in the pain. But I find it amazing that when we are just crying out in lament, when we're angry, when we are navigating some really heavy emotions, he doesn't run away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, maybe that's when we find a person who doesn't run away in a way that also gives us some information about how God acts, if we still have that idea.
Absolutely.
So you lead readers through this process of strategic reflection in the book. And I loved that about your book, that it has this, not workshop feel or workbook feel, but it is a practical book with things to think about and things to write. So can you define what you mean by strategic reflection and tell us how to do it?
Sure. So strategic reflection, or what you'll find in the book, is there's a process to the reflection. The reflection builds, in a sense. And this is something, so I'm a teacher, and I think by trade. So teacher comes out of me. And one of the things that we do, even in the classroom, is that we reflect gradually, and it builds, one reflective activity builds on the other reflective activity. And it's not a rush, right? It's not a rushed reflection, but it is a planned strategic reflection to bring you to a particular end. Doesn't mean that you have to reflect on a particular thing, but there is a purpose behind every question. And that's pretty much kind of what we get with strategic reflection, but God is that way. Throughout the scriptures, we see him asking these very reflective questions of humans, which is hilarious because we know he knows everything. So we're like, why is he asking these questions? And so the strategy of reflection woven in through the scriptures, like, you know, when Adam and Eve, he says, where are you? We know God knows where they are, right? He
Yes.
knows where they are. You know, with Cain and Abel, when he talks to Cain, why is your face downcast? Like, why are you? And we know he knows why. He knows what's going on in Cain's heart, but the questions are designed strategically to pull something out of you that you may not have otherwise been aware of. And this process of strategic reflection was something that God really led me on and brought professionals to help me through. And it's one of the things that I give to the reader in this book in hopes that it would be helpful for them as it was helpful for me.
Yeah. And you take readers through this process through times of hurt, but also times of failure comes up in the book. Tell us why you included failure as its sort of own topic and how that relates to times of hurt.
I think we live in a generation that talks a lot about trauma, and usually it's about what someone did to me. And so that kind of becomes like, oh, yes, I know I need to work through this kind of pain that someone may have enacted. Maybe someone left you, or maybe someone hurt you, or things like that. But a lot of times, failure in and of itself is painful for us to process, and we don't often process it. We don't think of it as trauma because it's like, well, it did. And so oftentimes it's just like, well, we'll just push it away. But failure plays in your mind and provides a narrative in your mind that we often ignore as we're trying to process the pain of a father leaving, or we're trying to process the pain of a loved one passing away and things like that. And we don't often think about failure in and of itself produces its own hard time that we don't often process. We just kind of race to the next thing. But because it's unprocessed pain, it forms this narrative. And if we are not careful, we begin living within the pain of failure and not even knowing it.
So give us an example of a couple of kinds of failure that you're referring to, types of failures.
Yeah. So I think one of the failures that I know that I navigated was when I stepped out to try to do something. I wanted to start this nonprofit organization, which I did, and it was going well, but I wasn't able, I was struggling to get the financial resources and things like that for it. And the picture in my mind was not coming out into the real world. And eventually I just was like, it's not working, and walked away from it. And in my mind, I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. I'll just go move on to the next thing. But internally, I processed that as, I failed. I gave up. It didn't work out. It's my fault. And so I processed it that way. Another area is in my motherhood. I don't know about anybody else, but nothing like motherhood to make you feel like you're failing sometimes.
Every day.
Every day. And so, you know, having a child, when we had our first 2 children, we were struggling. We were struggling financially. We were on food stamps. We were having a hard time. And here we were, these 2 individuals with degrees, and we did all the things that our parents told us to, like, have a good life and do these things. But we also came out in the middle of the recession in 2008. And so we weren't prepared for that. But I internalized that as I failed my kids. Like, I'm not good enough to get a good job. I'm not good enough to do this. I'm failing them. I'm a failure. And of course, I didn't sit on that for too long. I just moved on to the next thing. Come on, Dominique, just get it right. But it was kind of sitting in me like, there's something that I set out to do that I can't do, and it's all my fault. And for me, it came out in motherhood. It came out in jobs and applying for jobs. It came out in trying to, start a nonprofit or follow my dreams, because that was my big thing when I was in my 20s. I was like, I gotta follow my dreams. And then the dreams would deteriorate and they weren't working out. And so then that was more like, I feel like I'm failing. Or my relationship, as I was married to my husband, we would get in arguments. And I told myself, I know that I will never argue. Like, I will be the wife that doesn't argue. I've seen arguing. It doesn't work out. And so I get into a relationship and I'm married and I'm arguing about socks. Like, I'm like, what is happening? Why
Oh,
am I failing?
socks can be a big thing.
They can be. It felt like it to me, but it felt as though I was failing in what I set out to do, even in my marriage. And so all of that was unprocessed and just kind of lived in me and produced narratives that I lived out in pain. But when somebody would ask me, what is painful in your life? I would have never said the failure. It was just not something that I would have thought of. But when I call it out specifically and say, where are areas that you feel like you failed? Instead of saying pain, I have to say failed so that I can start to think, oh, well, this, and this. And then I start seeing some of the pain that rests behind it.
And I would think that unprocessed failure stops us from risking again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're afraid to fail again and go through that adverse reaction, whatever it would have been.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I definitely, I need to think about this, about why this is, but I definitely have to move through a fear of failure and I think public embarrassment over starting new things or doing something that's like feels extra entrepreneurial or risky. I definitely have that fear of failure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've noticed within my own journey that it usually comes from somewhere and it's an unprocessed something that is resting there. We have so many things that are unprocessed because the pace of life, we're just moving as fast as we can. And things just kind of sit there unprocessed. And when we try, it's almost like when we try to step out on that again, it's like, ouch. And you're like, whoa, why does that hurt? I have no idea why that hurts. But the ouch is good because it lets us know, oh, there's something there. There's something there that needs to be processed, that needs to be, I need to talk through, that I need to kind of reflect through. And so I praise God now. I praise God now for the ouch. I did not at first, but now I do. When I try to step out on something, I'm like, that's painful or that's scary or I don't want to do that. Yeah.
That could be your next book title, Praise God for the Ouch.
I love that title, actually.
Well, I'm going to remember it for sure. So Dominique, last night, my 27-year-old daughter came for supper, which of course I loved. And we always have good talks. And I said, tomorrow I am interviewing an author who wrote in her book that God is faithful to himself. And I need you to know that was a big light bulb for me because I've always heard that God is faithful and I always assumed it meant to me. So can you unpack that for us, God's faithfulness to God's self, and tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah, so this was a big moment of realization for me in my journey of learning where God was and in my journey of learning God's goal. We often say that God is faithful, that God never changes. And we are excited about that. I don't know about anybody else. I am excited about that. When I would hear God never changes, he's faithful and all these things, I'm like, this is great. He's someone I can really trust. But then I began to realize through pain, because when I would pray, things wouldn't happen the way I said them. And then I started thinking, well, he's not so faithful if he's not doing the things that I'm praying. And then I would want things to turn out a certain way. And then I'd be like, he's not so faithful then. And then as I began to study the scriptures, I realized I'm missing it because he's faithful to himself. And that is what keeps it stable. If he was faithful to me, he would change every day. Sometimes I want chips and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I love chocolate and sometimes I hate chocolate. I know for some people, they're like, how can you hate chocolate? It happens. It's like an ebb and flow relationship. And so if God was constantly looking at me for how to show up, I would not be able to rely on him and his stability because I can't even rely on me and my stability. But because God is faithful to himself, he is faithful to his own word and he's faithful to what he says, I can then therefore trust him. So when Jesus says in the scriptures that in this life you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world, I can trust, okay, God is faithful to his word. And the interesting thing here is he never said you wouldn't have trouble. So why am I thinking I won't have trouble? Because if he's faithful to his word, now my thinking, I want to never have trouble. Why do I have trouble? But he said, in this world, you will have trouble. So he's faithful to what he has shared, but he's also faithful to the fact that he will be with you in it. And so that was something that I had to really navigate, and that changed everything for me, because I realized that though God loves me very much, he is not running after my every whim and desire. And that's actually a good thing. I think about my desires when I was 19 and I'm like, ooh, thank you, Lord, that you didn't give me that. So yeah.
God's faithfulness to himself, just to me, it feels like so central, such an important theological point that can help us when we're disappointed with things not turning out the way we want, just like you said, or our, millions of prayer requests, or trying to manipulate God, which sometimes happens. Like we started at the beginning of this conversation, you were talking about the prosperity gospel. And it is such a profound thought, Dominique. How can that thought, God is faithful to himself, help listeners right now who might be feeling disappointed?
I often think about, what has God's goal been throughout the scriptures? And we see that God has always had a goal of redeeming and reconciling humanity back to himself. He's consistently said, I will be their God and they will be my people, from the Old Testament into the New. So what I'm going through right now may be hard, but the goal of God remains the same, that he desires to be my God in this situation, and for me to be his people in the midst of the situation. He desires a relationship with me no matter what it looks like or feels like. And then I begin to realize that my relationship with God, because of his faithfulness, will outlast my circumstances. And so if my relationship with God is his primary goal, and my relationship with God will outlast my circumstances, though hard, begin to look a little smaller.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So what changes for us as we become aware that God is with us? I'm giving a spoiler to your book. God is with us in everything we go through, no matter what, the good or the bad. What changes for us when we really understand that?
I think it becomes an acceptance of the ups and downs. And a realization that God is with us in it all. I often try to make examples from my life with relationships with other humans, because sometimes those are a little easier to navigate. But in my relationship with my husband, I bring him up a lot because I asked his permission and he gave me free reign. So I'm like, hey, I can bring this up. So
if he's going to be bad with socks, he's good with examples.
There we go.
Yeah.
And so my relationship with my husband, one of the things that we realized is that our life will have its share of challenges. There was a time when my husband was being rushed to the hospital because of some growths and things that he was dealing with in his body. There were times where I was being rushed to the mental hospital. There were instances where we didn't have any money and we had to go on food stamps, and people were like bringing us toilet paper out of the kindness of their hearts. And it was like the best gift ever. And in all of these ups and downs, we had each other. There was some stability in the fact that there was relationship. And that same stability is what God offers us. That in the ups and downs of life, we are not alone. That we can walk through it. And that is one of the things I believe that plagues the human more than anything. That when we go through this, I'm all alone. And the stability God offers us in this realization is that no, you're not alone. It may be hard and there may be trouble like I had previously told you there would be, but you are not alone. And there comes a confidence when you're not alone. I remembered one time my daughter climbing up this tower on a playground. And I am freaking out as a mom. Like, why is she climbing up the highest tower at this playground? And my husband whispered, he says, it's because you're here. She's more confident and courageous because you're here. She wouldn't have done it if you weren't here. And so the relationship, there is a power in relationship. And God offers that to us through every season of our life.
I'd like to ask you, and you've probably already answered this, Dominique, but I think it is such a pressing reality for people that I'd like you to address it one last time as we wind up. And that is just if you could speak and encourage the person who maybe believes that with their head, but they're not feeling it in their heart right now, that God is with them.
Yeah. I was that person for a long time. Sometimes I'm still that person. Sometimes I'm like, I know this. I wrote a whole book about it. And still sometimes I'm like, I don't feel it. And one of the things that I've learned about feelings is that they catch up. And sometimes it is about resting in what I know, even when I don't feel it. And being okay to rest in that and letting my feelings catch up. It's so interesting. When I had my third child, I dealt with a lot of like disassociation and some things like that. And just hormonally, just things were going wonky. And I didn't feel like a mom. I didn't feel like I had this kid. Like, I'm like, this kid feels not like mine. She came out of me, like all of the things. And I'm like, but she doesn't feel like mine. And so I had to remind myself that she's yours. She's yours and the feelings will catch up. So love her like she's yours because she is. And guess what? The feelings did catch up. And now you can't tell me anything. Nobody would be able to tell me that this child is not mine. But at the beginning, because of things that I was navigating with my hormones and things that were going on in my body, the feelings, they just hadn't caught up yet. And that's okay.
Thank you. Dominique, the tagline at NavPress, as you know, is bold, loving, and sensible. How does your book fit with that vibe?
Well, I think it's bold because we're tackling some pretty tough stuff and doing it vulnerably and loving, because that is why I wrote this book. It really was out of love for God and for the reader. And there are many pages that I wrote crying, like boo-hooing, because I was just so grateful to be able to write it. But also I was thinking about the person that may read it and the possibility maybe that the words would help them in the darkest moments. I was like overwhelmed with love for the reader. And I'm like, maybe a line will shine some light in the darkest moments. And I remember when those little glimmers of light were so precious to me. I think you said sensible. Was that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bold, loving, sensible.
Sensible.
But 2 out of 3 is like,
hey,
ain't bad, but keep going.
But yeah, sensible. I mean, I think it's sensible.
It is sensible.
There are definitely some things that feel in the book that kind of rub against some of the ways we would typically navigate something. But I think that they bring us to a reality that is true with God. And so, yeah, bold, loving, and sensible.
I love it. Can you end us off by blessing our readers and listeners?
Absolutely. May God meet you on each page of this book and in each part of this podcast. In each moment of reflection, may your mask fall and your costume be replaced with authenticity. And may you find God in your hardest moments and in your easiest ones. And may his character and presence be found in life's mountaintops and valley lows.
Amen. Thank you, Dominique.
Thank you.